After last summer's heat dome and the many fires in the interior of British Columbia, everyone's looking at, wondering about what's going to happen this year. So I'm going to talk to Professor Laurie Daniels of the Department of Forest and Conservation Sciences at the University of British Columbia about that. So welcome to the interview, Laurie.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, look, what causes wildfires in BC?
In BC, we have somewhere around 13 to 1400 wildfires per year, and typically about 60% of them start from lightning and about 40% are started from some form of human ignitions.
So we're talking about lightning. There's a storm, and generally they would be in the interior, would they not?
Yeah, our weather patterns here in BC mean along the coast, we don't get as much lightning as we do in the interior BC. So the interior BC is where the concentration of our lightning ignitions occur. We often see them associated with weather systems, frontal systems that generate large outbreaks of lightning. We see those under hot, dry conditions in the summer, and often if there's a high pressure system that begins to break down, you can actually get lightning outbreaks with multiple, up to hundreds of lightning strikes in short periods of time, starting many fires across a region.
And what about the human caused wildfires? What kind of activity are we talking about there?
There's a whole range of activities that can contribute. Some of them are unfortunately, accidental negligence, campfires that are left in either camping areas or in remote areas where people have been out enjoying nature but not taking care of their campfire properly. It can also be from recreational vehicles. I think people are often surprised, don't realize that ATVs and motorbikes generate a lot of heat, and you're riding kind of on trails, pull off a trail. Then the heat off of the engine can actually create enough heat to leave a smoldering fire as you leave the site. You might not even recognize that you have accidentally started a fire. There's also industrial sources. We see equipment being used, whether it's brushing equipment or equipment used for construction or for managing vegetation, or even the forest industry. There's lots of things that we do in terms of harvesting and moving wood in the forest and onto vehicles that can create sparks and start fires. And so often what we find, in fact, is in the heat of the summer when the fire danger ratings are very high, there's restrictions that say we can't be operating in the forest under these hot, dry conditions, or we can only operate in the morning up until a certain time of day, and then we have to kind of monitor a site to make sure there wasn't a smoldering ignition started, but no heavy equipment operating, say after 1 p.m.
What role does climate change play in the in wildfires these days?
We see climate change playing a role in a few different ways. So one is we're finding that the fire season is lengthening right now. So when we actually measure when are fires starting in the spring, how late into the summer, end of summer and into the fall are they going, that window when fires can occur is becoming broader. So we're having earlier springs, more rapid snow melts that leave a more prolonged period that allow heat and drought to build up. So that's the second component. So longer fire seasons with earlier springs, we get deeper droughts. And in the heat of the summer, when in British Columbia, in particular in the southern interior BC, we're really primed for fire, we're finding that the temperatures are hotter and the drought is more pronounced as a result of that lengthened season. And then the third component is the extremes that we're experiencing. In 2017 and 2018, and again in 2021, we had these extreme high pressure systems leading to maximum temperature records being broken all across the province. I remember keeping track in 2017, between the end of June and the beginning of September, I counted 85 high temperature records were broken in that summer, and we burned 1.2 million hectares of forests. Along came the summer of 2021, that heat dome at the end of June, we broke 69 records within a week. And of course, that led to the most catastrophic fires that we've experienced in the southern interior BC ever. The tragic fire that burnt right through the community of Lytton after temperatures were at record temperatures of 49.7 degrees C. and a fire that destroyed 90% of the community, and tragically 2 lives were lost.
Now, down in the US, particularly on the West Coast and like California, utilities are often, utility infrastructure is often starts fires. For instance, a power line comes down and sparks a fire. But I understand in BC that that doesn't happen not nearly as often.
No, we see during that season, the peak of the fire season in California is often driven by the Santa Ana or the El Diablo winds, those winds that come off of the deserts to the east, over the mountain ranges, and then sweep down from the mountains, kind of these compressing, heating winds that are often at extreme wind speeds, upwards of 80, 100, 120 kilometers an hour, hurricane force winds coming out of the mountains and towards the ocean under hot, dry conditions. So you can imagine your forest is primed for fire because it's hot and dry. It only takes a spark, and those winds blowing down power lines or blowing trees that then fall into the power lines and bring them down are creating those ignition points. And under hot, dry, and extremely windy conditions, well, we've seen the devastating effects with fast moving fires that exceed even our technology to put them out, or even tragically in many cases to be able to evacuate quickly. We're lucky in British Columbia in that we don't have the same weather systems that set up. We don't get those big high pressure domes in the interior that create the same types of wind events during the hottest and driest times of year. So we simply have not experienced to the same extent those wind-driven ignitions interacting with power lines as fire starts. They do occur periodically in British Columbia, but not a major source of our ignitions, not in the way that we've seen south of the border in California.
Interesting. And what are we expecting in 2022, Lori? Is it going to be as bad as last year or worse? Hopefully better.
The million-dollar question, isn't it? And this year, the time of year, February, I would say at this time of year, what we often look for is how big of a snowpack has built up. What are the chances that that's going to be a persistent snowpack into the spring? Because if we have a lot of snow and it takes a long time to melt, it means that we have a cooler spring. We have an abundance of moisture kind of out of those mountain systems and maintaining moisture into our interior systems in particular. And this year is a La Nina year, which tends to have greater snowfalls and greater snow accumulations, unless we get periodic, warming periods that melt out that snow in the heart of the winter. We think of La Ninas in general as being kind of conditions that are less conducive to fire in the next growing season, in the next fire season. El Nino years, I tend to be more worried about them. La Ninas are good snow seasons. Good year to have a ski pass here in British Columbia, and maybe hinting at a less intensive fire season as a result. Having said that, I have to admit we've had La Nina years in the last decade where we had early and rapid snow melts with the big flooding in the spring. And even though we had good snowpacks the winter before, we still ended up with really big fire seasons. So again, those extreme temperatures that seem to be coming alongside climate change are making some of those patterns that we relied on in the past a little bit less predictable. For the interior BC, it's the end of June. As we come up to Canada Day, that seems to be really a strong indicator these days of what kind of summer we're going to have. So come back at the end of June and let's revisit that question and take a look. How warm and dry has it been? Are we building up the kinds of conditions that make it very conducive to fire? And that would give us a pretty good indication by the end of June what July and August might have in store for us.
Well, between now and June, we'll keep our fingers crossed. Lori, thank you very much for your insights. Always appreciated.
Oh, you're welcome.